Welcome back to the Common Sense Crypto channel, everyone. This is Rich making another video on XRP today, as usual. So, wherever you are in this vast planet, I hope you're all having a nice day today. We're going to discuss XRP, and I'll start by mentioning Smoke, the well-documented cryptocurrency and wealth transfer. One topic they frequently discuss is the massive shift of wealth over the next 20 years. However, many of us will become wealthy with XRP well before the next 20 years are up. The event will take place in the upcoming years. The year 2030 is still in everyone's sights. And I repeated it several times, that 2030 timeline could be trimmed by a few years. I believe that the next 2 years will see a lot of developments. Believe that institutional adoption will occur first, followed shortly by mass acceptance, as the institutions will want to onboard as many individuals as they can. However, the massive shift of wealth is true and has already started. Furthermore, I have no idea where all of this money will go. Everyone believes that all of this money will wind up in cryptocurrency, You're probably lucky if 60–70% of it ends up as cryptocurrency. Global banking will be run according to a blueprint developed before Bitcoin, Ripple, and XRP existed. This was planned out long ago, People are unaware of that. They believe that everything only recently began, perhaps in the past few years. However, ISO 222 and Ripple both debuted in 2004. Do you believe that was a coincidence? Not at all. They saw the future, which is why that occurred. They anticipated that it would take some time to develop, and it has. Now, 20 years later, 21 years later, here we are, and at last, things are beginning to fit together. ISO is currently on the verge of being live this year. Additionally, Ripple has consistently adhered to ISO 222. They were the first to embrace it from the beginning. Listen to it. Extremely careful. The standards used in the payment industry nowadays vary greatly from one country to another. Therefore, you follow a different approach if you're utilizing the system or tips in the US or Europe. Furthermore, there is a very limited amount of richness in the data that you may convey. You end up with a collection of opaque, unstructured data and closed networks that are unable to communicate with one another. Consequently, there is a great deal of manual intervention and, in the end, a very bad payment experience. These issues will be resolved with ISO 20022. Thus, ISO 20022 is a worldwide standard for the exchange of financial data. Through payment processing and rich data transfer, this facilitates interoperability across many systems. Additionally, because it is open and adaptable, it will promote competition. Since the beginning, Ripple has adhered to ISO 20022. We've always understood that this is the best course for payments and that everyone would benefit from it. And in that regard, we were truly pioneers. In order to influence the future direction of payments, we have also joined the standard body. Returning to your security point, Ripple is steadfast in its commitment to the greatest security, privacy, and safety standards. And the fact that we are SOC 2 certified is evidence of this. This means that anyone using Ripple's solution is aware that we follow the most recent security and privacy standards. For those who are unfamiliar with SOC 2 reports provide incredibly useful information about an organization's security capabilities so each of their customers and users can have confidence in that service. Additionally, we received our SOC 2 Type 2 report in accordance with that. Not only do we have procedures and policies in place for different security, availability, and system integrity standards, but we've also been doing so regularly for a while. Consider that this video was released in August 2023. What has Ripple accomplished since then? They obtained authorization to operate money transmitters across the United States. They extend it to include custody. They keep moving in the direction of tokenization. Even the initiatives being added to the XRP ledger. Since this is the future, they are based on tokenization and AI cross-border payments. Ripple was aware of this for a long time. And for that reason, they immediately associated themselves with ISO. And anyone who tries to claim that ISO won't be a major concern is just mistaken. Additionally, I would pile up on all of the ISO cryptocurrencies. They're all still incredibly underappreciated. ABARQQNT, I would have a small amount of each. You will be ready for ISO's launch later this year if you do this. XRP is the cryptocurrency that will survive lawsuits and crashes. XRP continues to rebound. This would be the Rocky Balboa of cryptocurrency. This is how XRP rose to become the cryptocurrency's most resilient asset. They discussed the case and the crashes. Additionally, it was widely believed that XRP will eventually perish. People still claim that XRP is a dead coin, you know. It is immobile. But hold off till it happens. Suddenly, the whole story is going to be different. Hold off until ISO adds value to XRP. Await the ETF's launch. Suddenly, the haters will all be eliminated. However, their hatred is not limited to XRP. They despise any cryptocurrencies that operate on ISO-compliant networks. I always referred to them as the Hateful Eight because of this. Because Q&T is hated by all. They believe it to be significantly overpriced and overrated, while in reality, it is significantly underpriced and undervalued. ABARP also receives a lot of criticism. Individuals simply like criticizing these currency. Do you know why? Thus, they perceive it as a danger. They consider each of them to be a danger to Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin. It's also true. Because they genuinely have a use case and function, they pose a threat. This is also intriguing. Velo intends to include the XRP chain into the universe. It appears that XRP will be introduced into the cosmos. And Mr. Man brought this to our attention, bringing us one step closer to the RLUSD announcement on Stellar. Do you recall who worked on Velo? McCaleb, Jed. Jed made Stellar. This would also make sense. To be honest, it's unbelievable that it hasn't already occurred. Stellar and Ripple continue to collaborate, you know. Brad, I have no doubt that he still communicates with Jed McCaleb. Jed went off and did his own thing, you know. However, XRP and XLM will also be operating alongside each other in that new financial system. I'm interested to see where this goes. The Fed has withdrawn its recommendations for banks on cryptocurrency. The 2022 and 2023 advice that required banks to inform or obtain approval before engaging in crypto or stablecoin activities was recently revoked by the Federal Reserve. I appreciate that fact. The banks are being given the green light. However, Caitlin Long noted that the Fed had not revoked its anti-crypto guidance from January 27, 2023, which the board had approved at the time by a vote of 7-0. However, it seems to have issued a board vote and revoked all other recommendations. This suggests, in my opinion, that the Fed has not yet complied with Trump's executive order. Fed-regulated banks are therefore at a disadvantage compared to OCC or FDIC-regulated banks for stablecoins and other activities because Fed anti-crypto guidance is still in effect. This would be reversed when the stablecoin measure is signed into law, but it's not quite over yet. Therefore, banks that are subject to regulations will continue to be at a disadvantage against other banks.